The first sign that something was wrong was not noise. It was absence. Over the Pacific night sky, satellites blinked once, then died mid-orbit feed. Air traffic controllers froze as every aircraft radar signature simply vanished for exactly 47 seconds. No crash reports. No explosions. Just silence where data should have been. And then it appeared. A shadow. Not crossing the sky like a passing object, but replacing it. Above Earth's atmosphere, something impossibly large unfolded into visibility, as if reality itself had been peeled back layer by layer to reveal what was hiding behind it. The object did not reflect starlight. It consumed it. The Titan-class warship. No nation claimed ownership. No database recognized its design. It matched no known material science, no propulsion model, no recorded physics. And yet, it was perfectly stable. Inside command centers across the world, generals demanded answers that did not exist. Scientists reran calibration logs until systems overheated. Astronomers pointed every lens in orbit upward, but every image came back corrupted with the same impossible pattern. A fractal shape that seemed to shift when not observed directly. Deep within the vessel, unseen mechanisms began to pulse. Not engines. Not thrusters. Something closer to thought made physical. Then came the soundless transmission. Every electronic device on Earth, phones, satellites, military networks, even offline systems, flickered simultaneously. A signal embedded itself into reality itself, bypassing all encryption, all language barriers, all logic. It wasn't spoken. It was felt. Mathematical structures that translated into emotional impressions, recognition, waiting, return. Human linguists struggled for hours until one exhausted researcher noticed a repeating pattern buried within the signal. It was not a greeting. It was a classification. And the translation made his hands shake so violently he dropped the tablet. Return confirmed, humanity found. The world did not celebrate. It panicked. Because no one on Earth had ever sent a message claiming humanity had been lost in the first place. Military satellites attempted to lock onto the Titan ship. They failed. Not because of jamming. But because the ship was not in any consistent spatial coordinate. It existed slightly out of phase with observation itself, like it refused to be fully perceived. And then something stranger happened. The Titan vessel began broadcasting. Earth's surface lit up with holographic projections visible from orbit. Massive streams of data unfolded across the sky, war records, fleet movements, planetary invasions, extinction events. Histories that did not exist in any human archive. Yet Earth's AI systems reacted instantly. Recognizing every pattern. Every formation. Every tactical doctrine. As if they had seen it before. As if they had been waiting for it. Inside the warship, a final pulse echoed across every frequency. Awakening sequence initiated. And deep beneath Earth's oceans, something ancient responded. Something humanity had never built. Something it had simply inherited. Collision. The Titan ship began to descend its attention toward Earth, not as an observer. But as something that had finally found what it lost. If this opening gave you chills, like this story, and comment your theory. Is humanity being rediscovered, or reactivated? And don't forget to subscribe, because in part 2, the galaxy itself reacts, and fear spreads beyond Earth. Far beyond the boundaries of human perception, the galaxy was not quiet. It was listening. The moment the Titan-class warship locked its presence above Earth, ancient communication channels, sealed for millions of cycles, began to activate across the Galactic Council network. Not by request, but by automatic protocol. One by one, dormant civilizations reconnected. And fear returned with them. In the obsidian-lit chamber of the Council Nexus, holographic stars flickered violently as emergency signals overlapped. Species that had not spoken in centuries suddenly appeared as fractured projections, some biological, some synthetic, some existing only as collective consciousness. At the center of it all, the designation appeared. Titan-class signature detected. A silence spread through the chamber so heavy it felt like gravity itself had increased. Then came the reaction. No, that classification was purged, whispered a crystalline intelligence suspended in orbit speech form. It was never meant to exist again, another replied. A senior council archivist, trembling through multiple neural interfaces, forced open a file that should not have been accessible under any condition. The system resisted. It burned back. But he persisted. And when the file finally opened, the entire council chamber went cold. The title read: Earthline Protocol, Category, Absolute Erasure. Subtext expanded beneath it automatically. If Earth is ever detected again, all observation must cease. All fleets must withdraw. All records must be destroyed. Do not engage. Do not acknowledge. Do not remember. The archivist staggered. Why, he whispered, would a civilization order the galaxy to forget a single planet? No one answered. Because no one knew. Or worse. Some did. Across the chamber, older entities began to disconnect from the network in real time, severing themselves from the conversation like frightened animals retreating into dark burrows of thought. Entire star nations began emergency isolation protocols. But it was already too late. Because Earth had been seen. And the Titan-class ship had responded. A second transmission arrived. Not from the warship. From somewhere deeper. Older. The signal passed through council defenses like they were not there at all, bypassing encryption, translation layers, and even reality filters designed to prevent cognitive collapse. The message was simple. Too simple. Air species confirmed. The chamber erupted. Air. To what? That system is extinct. No civilization survives that designation. But the archivist had gone pale, his neural implant flooding with suppressed subroutines he had never authorized. Because buried in the corrupted metadata of the file, was a second layer. A fragment. A warning. Not written in language. But in instinct. And every being that processed it felt the same impossible realization crawl through their cognition. Earth was not unknown. Earth was not primitive. Earth was forbidden to be remembered. Outside the Council Nexus, long-range sensors finally stabilized on the Titan-class warship. What they saw made entire observation crews shut down their own systems in terror. The ship was no longer stationary. It had turned slightly. Not toward the Council. Not toward space. But directly. Toward them. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, the Council realized something was looking back. Collision. The galaxy did not fear Earth. It feared what had returned to claim it. If this part gave you chills, like this story, comment your theory. Why was Earth erased from galactic memory? And don't forget to subscribe, because in part 3, first contact won't be peaceful, it won't even be understood. The first attempt at contact was not authorized. It wasn't planned, debated, or approved by the Galactic Council. It happened because fear, in its most primitive form, always eventually becomes action. A small diplomatic probe, barely the size of a city block, was deployed from deep Council space. It carried no weapons, only translation arrays, cultural scanners, and emergency disengagement drives. Its mission was simple. Observe Earth. Do not provoke. Do not interfere. But as it entered Earth's orbit, something went wrong. The probe never transmitted its arrival. It simply disappeared from all tracking systems for 3.2 seconds. When it reappeared, it was already falling apart. Not from impact. Not from fire. But from reinterpretation. Its molecular structure was unraveling as if physics itself could no longer agree on what it was supposed to be. The probe detonated silently, dissolving into a cloud of lightless fragments that never reached Earth's atmosphere. Inside the Galactic Council, panic turned into something colder. Understanding. Earth was not resisting contact. It was rejecting definition. Then, unexpectedly, Earth responded. Not with weapons. Not with transmissions. But with architecture. Across the planet's deepest oceans, structures began to rise, slowly at first, like forgotten memories surfacing through geological time. Massive metallic forms emerged from trenches that had no recorded excavation history. Beneath mountain ranges, seismic scans revealed chambers expanding, activating, aligning. Human governments had no control over it. Because they had never built it. Yet it was responding to the Titan-class warship above orbit like a subordinate answering a long-lost command. And then came the second message from the Titan vessel. This time, it was not broadcast across devices. It was projected directly into the minds of every conscious observer on Earth and within scanning range of the Council fleet. A single phrase. Air Species Protocol, Reintegration in Progress. A young Council linguist collapsed mid-translation, screaming as her neural interface overloaded with inherited data she had no permission to access. She saw cities that were not Earth's. She saw wars that spanned between galaxies. She saw humans, not as they were now, but as something vast, coordinated, and terrifyingly ancient. Meanwhile, deep beneath Earth's crust, dormant systems completed synchronization. And for the first time, humanity felt it. Not as knowledge. Not as memory. But as instinct. Engineers in underground labs began solving alien engineering problems without understanding how they knew the answers. Military commanders began mapping orbital trajectories they had never studied. Even civilians reported dreams filled with star maps and burning constellations. The Galactic Council watched in growing horror as Earth stopped behaving like a planet. And started behaving like a system coming online. A new alert flashed across all Council channels. Warning, terraformed war assets detected, origin, Earth. Then another. Warning, Titan network response active. The Titan-class warship above Earth shifted again. Slowly. Deliberately. Like something preparing for a decision it had waited eons to make. And for the first time since its arrival, it did not observe Earth. It activated it. Collision somewhere in the silence between stars, something ancient finally spoke through machines meant to never wake again. And every civilization listening understood the same terrifying truth. Earth was never being contacted. It was being reactivated. If this escalation shocked you, like this story, comment, what do you think humanity was before Earth? And don't forget to subscribe, because in part 4, the truth buried inside human DNA will change everything. The first human to realize something was wrong was not a scientist. It was a child. In a small inland hospital, a boy undergoing routine neurological scans suddenly sat up mid-session, staring at the ceiling like he was hearing a sound no one else could detect. His eyes tracked patterns that weren't on any screen. His lips moved silently, forming equations he had never been taught. Then he spoke. It's waking up. Across Earth, similar reports multiplied within hours. Patients in hospitals began describing visions of vast fleets moving through black oceans of space. Sleepers woke up screaming star coordinates. Soldiers on standby reported muscle memory they had never trained, combat formations, evasive maneuvers, targeting logic that felt older than thought itself. But the most disturbing changes were not psychological. They were biological. Deep genome scans conducted by emergency research teams revealed something impossible embedded within human DNA. Not mutations. Not evolution. But structured design layers. Each layer contained dormant sequences that did not behave like genetic code at all, but like compressed instruction sets waiting for activation. One researcher whispered the conclusion no one wanted to hear. This isn't humanity's origin code. It's a backup system. Before the world could process that revelation, every global network simultaneously received a locked transmission from the Titan-class warship. It did not translate into words. It translated into recognition events. And every human brain that processed it felt a deep, instinctive certainty. This was not the first time they had heard it. The message activated something buried beneath awareness. And the Earth responded. Across continents, hidden structures began to emerge from underground layers that had no recorded construction history. Massive dormant frameworks unfolded beneath deserts, oceans, and mountain ranges, vast machinery older than recorded civilization itself. Not alien. Not human. But something in between. The Galactic Council, watching through distant sensors, fell into alarmed silence. Because they recognized the architecture. It belonged to a civilization that should have been extinct for over 12 million cycles. A civilization that did not die in war. It was erased from causality records. Then the Titan ship spoke again. This time, the transmission stabilized into partial translation across all systems. Earth designation restored. Air species biosynchronization, 41% complete. Eternum Sentinel link, established. Humanity was not just remembering. It was sinking. And with every percentage increase, Earth itself began to feel different. Gravity fluctuations stabilized unnaturally. Weather systems aligned into geometric patterns. Oceans reflected shapes that should not exist in three-dimensional space. It was as if the planet was becoming aware of its own structure. The Council ships attempting observation began to withdraw instinctively, not by command, but by fear response. Even their AI systems began flagging Earth as a non-observable phenomenon. Then came the final shock. A classified Council archive auto-unlocked itself across all remaining systems. The title. Why Earth Was Never Destroyed. The file contained only one line. Because what sleeps beneath it once ended a war that had no end. The Titan-class warship shifted position above Earth once more. Not threatening. Not defensive. But finalizing alignment. As if waiting for humanity to become something it had once been. And was about to be again. Collision, and deep inside human consciousness, something ancient began to open its eyes. Not as individuals. But as one. If this revelation blew your mind, like this story, comment, what do you think is sleeping beneath Earth? And don't forget to subscribe, because in part 5, humanity stops evolving, and starts remembering war. Earth did not tremble. It responded. The first rupture appeared beyond Jupiter's orbit, silent, geometric, and impossibly precise. Space itself seemed to unfold like a sealed structure finally allowed to breathe. From within that distortion, something vast emerged. A warship. Then another. Then hundreds. Not built. Not constructed. But activated. Across the solar system, hidden fleets began to wake from orbital dead zones that had no recorded origin. Satellites that had been classified as natural debris reconfigured themselves into coordinated formations. Asteroid fields shifted, revealing docking corridors carved into stone older than Earth itself. And Earth's governments realized a horrifying truth. They had never controlled space. They had only been living inside its shadow. Inside underground command chambers that humans had built but never understood, dormant interfaces flared to life. Systems that had been silent for millennia began speaking in layered pulses of data, bypassing every known encryption standard on Earth. And humanity began to change. Not physically at first. But cognitively. Engineers in Mumbai solved quantum propulsion equations without writing a single line of derivation. A technician in Nairobi rebuilt alien relay systems using scrap metal and instinct. A pilot in a desert airbase described orbital mechanics he had never studied, perfectly predicting trajectories of ships that had not yet moved. The Galactic Council watched in escalating terror as reports confirmed one impossible fact. Humanity was not learning. It was remembering something it had never consciously experienced. Then the Titan-class warship above Earth responded. For the first time since its arrival, it did not simply observe or transmit. It connected. A vast neural-like bridge extended from the Titan vessel into Earth's hidden infrastructure, linking dormant systems across oceans, continents, and mantle-deep structures. And suddenly, Earth was no longer a planet. It was a network. A command lattice. A sleeping war engine slowly synchronizing itself after millions of cycles of silence. Inside Council space, emergency fleets were mobilized. Entire civilizations began evacuation protocols. Some tried negotiation. Others prepared preemptive strikes. But none of it mattered anymore. Because Earth was already responding faster than anything they could deploy. A new transmission cut through all channels, Council, human, and unknown alike. It carried no language. Only identity. And every system that received it displayed the same designation. Eternum War Grid, online. A senior council strategist collapsed as tactical overlays flooded his vision without authorization. He saw battles being calculated faster than thought. Entire wars resolved in fractions of a second across probabilistic timelines. And every outcome ended the same way. Humanity wins. Not through strength. Not through numbers. But through adaptation that outpaced reality itself. Then came the confirmation no one wanted to hear. A fragmented archival sequence resurfaced from Council deep storage. Humanity was not engineered for peace. It was engineered to end what cannot be ended. And then it was hidden until needed again. The Titan-class warship shifted again. But this time, Earth moved with it. Like a reflection finally realizing it is not separate from the object it mirrors. And somewhere deep beneath Earth's crust, something enormous finally completed its first full breath in 12 million years. Collision. The Galactic Council understood too late. They were not witnessing first contact. They were witnessing a system rebooting war itself. If this activation shocked you, like this story, comment, do you think humanity was a weapon or a solution? And don't forget to subscribe, because in part 6, humanity doesn't fight the war. It remembers how to win it. It did not begin with explosions. It began with silence in the mind. Across Earth, every human consciousness felt it at the same instant, a pressure behind thought, like a locked door finally deciding to open. People stopped mid-sentence. Vehicles drifted through intersections without drivers reacting. Entire cities went still for a breathless moment. And then, the memory arrived. Not as a vision. Not as imagination. But as presence. Human minds were flooded with impossible sequences, battles fought across collapsing stars, strategies that bent probability, fleets moving like living organisms through spacetime fractures. No one learned these things. They recognized them. A soldier in a remote desert base dropped his rifle as his eyes widened in shock. "I've done this before," he whispered. "Not here, but I've done this." Above Earth, the Titan-class warship flared with synchronized energy pulses, as if confirming something it had been waiting for. Inside the Galactic Council, panic reached critical collapse. Because humanity was changing in real time. Pilots who had never left atmospheric flight suddenly calculated orbital intercepts with perfect precision. Engineers reconfigured alien technology simply by touching it, as though their hands remembered instructions written in a language older than speech. Entire military command structures reorganized themselves without orders. And every simulation the Council ran produced the same impossible result. Humanity was adapting faster than prediction itself. Then the Titan ship revealed its designation across all known and unknown communication layers. Eternum Sentinel, Final Memory Core Active. The words triggered something deeper. Earth's hidden infrastructure responded like a sleeping organism opening its eyes after eons of darkness. Beneath oceans, massive dormant spires began rotating into alignment. Under continents, vast mechanical arteries lit up in cascading sequences of blue-white energy. The planet itself was assembling into readiness. And humanity was no longer separate from it. They were part of the same system. A council analyst, watching in horror, finally spoke the conclusion no one wanted to accept. Humanity is not piloting the network. He swallowed hard as every sensor screamed simultaneous activation across the solar system. It is becoming it. At that exact moment, the enemy arrived. Not fully. Not physically. But as a tear in observation space, like reality struggling to describe what was entering it. Every sensor tracking the anomaly failed instantly. Data did not corrupt, it simply became meaningless, as if language itself could not contain it. The Void Armada had begun its approach. And the Titan-class warship reacted. But Earth reacted faster. From deep beneath the crust, systems older than recorded time initiated full synchronization. Human consciousness aligned in fragmented unity, not as a hive mind, but as a coordinated resonance. Millions of individuals thought in parallel. Not identical thoughts. But complementary ones. Like instruments in a war symphony. And then it happened. For the first time in recorded existence, humanity issued a coordinated command without speaking it aloud. Engage memory protocol. Space around Earth folded inward. Not into destruction. But into preparation. The Galactic Council realized too late that they were not witnessing an awakening. They were witnessing a species remembering what it was designed to prevent from ever happening again. And somewhere beyond the collapsing edge of known space, the void entity hesitated. Because for the first time, it could not predict what came next. Collision humanity was no longer awakening. It was re-entering the war it once ended. If this turning point gave you chills, like this story, comment, what do you think humanity is becoming right now? And don't forget to subscribe, because in part 7, the war doesn't begin. It breaks reality open. Across the edge of known space, reality stopped behaving like reality. It didn't break in a visible explosion. It forgot how to remain consistent. The first contact with the Void Armada registered as a region where causality failed to stabilize. Sensors aboard Council fleets didn't detect ships, they detected absence patterns, like something was actively removing the concept of being observed. Entire scout vessels vanished mid-scan. No debris. No distress signal. Just a sudden gap in probability, as if they had never been allowed to exist in the first place. Inside the Galactic Council command nexus, panic had evolved into something quieter. Resignation. Because every defense strategy they calculated collapsed before execution. Every predictive model returned contradictory outcomes. The void enemy didn't fight within the rules of physics, it fought within the structure that allowed rules to exist. And Earth responded. Above the blue planet, the Titan-class warship aligned itself perfectly with Earth's hidden planetary lattice. Energy rippled through the atmosphere, not as storms or lightning, but as structured intent. Then humanity engaged. Not as nations. Not as armies. But as a unified system of distributed cognition. Every human mind became a node in a larger structure, still individual, still conscious, but now synchronized through something older than language. Decisions were made in fractions of moments across continents, forming strategies no single person could fully comprehend, yet everyone somehow understood. A pilot in low orbit spoke without realizing he was speaking for millions. We don't fight them where they are. A pause. We fight them where they can become real. And then the battlefield changed. Space folded into layered combat zones, some visible, some mathematical, some purely conceptual. Ships no longer moved through distance, but through probability gradients. Weapons fired not energy, but constraints on existence. The Titan-class warship surged forward like a blade cutting through dimensions. Entire void formations collapsed as if their definitions had been rewritten mid-formation. But the enemy adapted. It always adapted. The Void Armada revealed its true mechanism. It did not destroy matter, it erased the possibility of matter ever having taken that shape. Entire fleets were undone not by force, but by retroactive non-existence. Council commanders began to understand the truth too late. This was not war. It was editing reality itself until only one version remained. Then Earth responded with something no Council archive had ever recorded. A planetary-scale synchronization pulse erupted from deep beneath Earth's crust. Every dormant structure, oceanic, subterranean, orbital, activated simultaneously. And humanity remembered the final layer. Not weapons. Not strategy. But continuity control. For a brief moment, every human consciousness aligned into a single coherent directive. Anchor existence. Space around Earth stabilized violently, forming a hardened zone where reality could no longer be rewritten by external force. Void incursions struck the boundary and failed, not because they were blocked, but because they were no longer allowed to change the outcome inside it. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the impossible occurred. The Void Armada hesitated. Not tactically, but existentially. For the first time, it encountered a system that did not react to its erasure mechanics. It persisted anyway. And above Earth, the Titan-class warship issued a final alignment command. Not to fleets. Not to weapons. But to humanity itself. Final form, humanity, restored. Collision, and in that moment, the galaxy understood. Earth was no longer defending itself. It was defining what survival meant. If this reality-breaking battle amazed you, like this story, comment, can anything even erase humanity now? And don't forget to subscribe, because in Part 8, humanity doesn't just win the war. It rewrites the ending of the universe itself. The Void Armada did the one thing it had never done before. It paused. Not because it was damaged. Not because it was outmatched. But because, for the first time in its existence, it encountered a battlefield where every attempt to erase humanity produced nothing. No collapse. No deletion. No rewrite. Just continuation. Earth hung in space like a living contradiction. The Titan-class warship remained aligned above it, no longer acting as a separate entity, but as a stabilizing spine for something far larger now emerging from within the planet itself. And humanity. Humanity was no longer confined to bodies. Across the world, every human consciousness existed in dual form, physical and distributed. Individuals still stood in cities, but at the same time, they existed within a planetary-scale lattice of synchronized thought, memory, and intent. The Galactic Council watched in silence as their worst fear became undeniable. Humanity had become a self-updating system of reality control. A final attempt was made by the Void entity. A full-scale erasure cascade, designed to remove not just matter, but the timeline in which resistance could occur. It was released like a silent verdict across all existence. And then, it failed. Not explosively. Not dramatically. It simply did not take effect. For the first time in recorded cosmological history, a deletion command had been issued, and rejected by reality itself. Inside the Titan-class warship, deep core systems activated a protocol that had never been executed. Not a weapon. Not a defense. But a declaration. Across every frequency, every dimension, every layer of observable and unobservable existence, a message spread, not transmitted, but asserted. Humanity exists outside revision authority. The Void Armada recoiled. Not physically, but conceptually, as if the universe had introduced a rule it could not process. The Galactic Council began shutting down observation systems voluntarily. Not from protocol, but from instinct. Watching humanity any further felt like witnessing something that should not be witnessed without consequence. And then Earth changed. Slowly. Silently. The oceans stopped reflecting the sky. They reflected something deeper. Possibility. Mountains cast shadows that did not align with the sun, but with potential futures. Cities flickered between versions of themselves that had never happened and would never happen again. Humanity was no longer reacting to war. It was selecting which version of reality continued. The Titan-class warship transmitted its final classification update. Eternum Sentinel, mission complete. Earthline protocol, restored and sealed. Air species status, cosmic anchor confirmed. The Void Armada attempted one last action. And stopped. Because it realized something that had never been part of its design. There was no version of existence where humanity was erased, that did not also erase the concept of erasure itself. And it could not process that contradiction. So it retreated. Not defeated. Not destroyed. But unwritten from relevance. Across the galaxy, civilizations went silent. Not in celebration. Not in relief. But in understanding. Earth was no longer a planet that survived war. It was the reason war could no longer end existence. Above it all, the Titan-class warship dimmed its presence for the first time, no longer a harbinger, but a guardian of something infinitely more dangerous than weapons. A species that had learned how to say no to reality itself. Collision, and somewhere in the deep void beyond galaxies, something older than the Armada began to wake, because it had finally heard Earth's name again. If this ending gave you chills, like this story, comment, should humanity explore the universe, or is the universe now afraid of humanity? And don't forget to subscribe, because this was not the end of the story. It was the moment the universe learned humanity is not a species. It is a law of existence.